All right, guys, welcome back to Establish the Pass podcast presented by ClutchPoints. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, and we're back here for one of our biggest episodes of the year, and that is because we are making our picks for the Super Bowl 57, the Chiefs and the Eagles. We are down to 2, and as always, Dillon will make our picks for the game itself, but we will also dive into the 5,247,000 prop bets that are out there because we're not going to get to all of them, trust me. Or we may set a world record for podcast length. But we're going to talk about just some random ones that we always do yearly, and then we'll just bring up kind of some others that are listed on FanDuel and such that you may find intriguing if you want to bet on some of those in terms of finding some interesting value with some of these. But Dillon, the game is here, and was it the big game is here? Like, isn't it how all of these like the newscasts and everything can't use the Super Bowl? Like, so it's the big game or the game is here. Like, I always find that interesting how no one can actually say that when it comes to like some of these like commercials or sponsorships or promotions. Like, it's always the big game, and I guess you could say the big game is here.
So official. I think you'd think that saying it wouldn't be a big deal, but I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
I don't know
depends
why
on the
it is.
situation for how commercial what
Yeah.
the production is. I think on some shows they probably could. I'm wondering if they're just being overly careful there. We're gonna say
Yeah.
Super Bowl 57 on here. Hopefully, we're gonna be in okay
Whoops.
shape. But I couldn't be more excited for the two teams. I know we haven't really, the last couple of weeks we've mostly talked about some of the other things going on in the league with quarterbacks, coaches moving around. We did our award show last time, and now we finally, actually break down this matchup and reading and thinking about it for a couple of weeks. So it's good to finally get to this episode so I can just kind of say everything I have to say about this game, and then move on and just enjoy it. Yeah, it's all kind of just been in my brain for a couple, at least a few days here, where I've started trying to read over everything. My biggest immediate takeaway as we get into this is it's a really hard game to pick. These teams
Yeah.
are very where one team has a strength, the other has a weakness, or not, I wouldn't say a weakness, but maybe they're less strong. But both teams are just so good. I mean, they are the top 2 seeds. First time I think that we've had. I read that we've had the 2 number 1 seeds since Super Bowl 52 when the Eagles beat the Patriots. Obviously, that Eagles team, people might forget that they were a number 1 seed because you had Nick Foles leading them to that Super Bowl title. But yeah, it's two teams that, man, it's just a really hard one to pick. I think last year was easy for me because I was doing a kind of like a
Right.
reverse jinx situation where I kept picking against the Rams. But so this is, and even then, last year, really, if I had to have picked, and you went with the Rams as the winner, maybe I would have thought that they had an edge. Whereas in this one, I mean, it's reflected by the spread. It's reflected by basically every model you look at, whether it's Football Outsiders, PFFs, The Athletic, ESPN. They all have this kind of as like a 50-50 draw. The spread only 1.5 Eagles favorite. So man, I still to this moment I have a name in there, and I think I'm going to stick with it because I've thought about it long enough. But it's a really hard game to pick. Both teams are so good and they bring so much to the table, and I just can't wait to watch this matchup play out.
Yep. It will be a lot of fun. And again, there's so many different kind of facets to this thing. I mean, what we do know, again, Patrick Mahomes was kind of the storyline of the playoffs with injuries and such. And we're thinking, all right, this guy fully back and, the ankle and everything. And I think that's certainly, something that has progressed in a positive fashion now. And I think, again, that's one where we've talked about, he's our pick for the league MVP. And I mean, let's be honest, he should be everyone else's based on what he's done. But that's obviously, one of the bigger storylines we talked about in the playoffs here. But, against this Eagles defense, look, I mean, the Chiefs are, we've talked about it's still kind of the Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce show, but this is kind of one of those games where it's going to be interesting just to see how the Chiefs approach things from an offensive standpoint. Knowing that just like every other game, right? The Eagles know who target number 1 is, but it's looking around and wondering, who are the guys, and I feel like we always do this now, especially since there's no Tyreek Hill now. But it's like, who's the guy that's all of a sudden just going to step up and maybe just have a huge game for the Chiefs, maybe in that passing game outside of Travis Kelce. And again, there are options there, but I think that's one of the more interesting things to think about heading into this one too.
Yeah, absolutely. They've made it work so far. They've compromised maybe some of the explosiveness that they previously had for being more consistent down to down, and Mahomes is just obviously improving himself. So I think that's that matchup in particular. This Eagles defense so good, but that do think that Mahomes has made this work with all these other guys, and they do still have a strong offensive line. Maybe the tackles, that's one part when you look at kind of the matchup up front for the Chiefs that does scare you a bit. The line's in much better shape than it was a couple of years ago when they faced the Bucks, but I wouldn't say Wiley and Brown on the outside at the two tackle positions are necessarily the top guys at their positions, and the Eagles are going to be able to create pressure. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Chiefs, and I'm sure Andy Reid knows that I don't know if we're going to be having single tight ends blocking Hassan Reddick, like we saw on the play that Purdy got hurt on. Yeah, it should be interesting. I think the Chiefs, I do trust, that is one thing too overall in this matchup, the coaching matchup. As much as Sirianni has taken every edge that he's been able to get, and I've really, obviously you've had him as your coach of the year. I couldn't have more to praise for him, but we kind of talked also about, we forget or not forget, but with that award, we don't really honor necessarily the guys who are consistently the best coaches in the year or in the league, like Andy Reid. And they started at certain points. To your point of with the amount of weapons, a lot of times the Bengals in this past AFC title game, this is from Ted Wynn's article on the Athletic, was going through the matchup of how the Eagles or the Chiefs could adjust to what the Eagles might do. The Bengals were double teaming Kelsey a lot, bracketing him as you would expect they would, given with all the other weapons that were compromised. So a lot of times they would drop plays where Kelsey would stay in to block, and they would just take two defenders out of the secondary essentially, and kind of create some matchup problems for some of the other players. So it's a pick your poison kind of thing. Kelsey also, it's not like teams have known that he's going to be getting the ball in a lot of matchups, and it hasn't mattered. He's still able to find openings, and he's a great guy at finding area and space and zone defense. So it's that matchup itself is really intriguing, but I think one of the biggest parts of just that when the Eagles are on defense and the Chiefs have the ball is, can Mahomes stay off the ground? Because with those tackles, maybe having times where guys are going to be able to run through it. Patrick, these 2 extra weeks and his mobility, I mean, it couldn't be more important. If this game was played 2 weeks ago when the AFC title and NFC title games were played, overall, my opinion on it might have been changed based on the limited mobility and how important that is. The Chiefs haven't, or the Eagles haven't faced a quarterback exactly like Patrick outside of for the first part of the game with Aaron Rodgers in that Packers game. We saw what Dak did in the second matchup when he was out for the first one between the Eagles and Cowboys, put up huge numbers. So you just worry that if Patrick's able to get outside and make that first man miss and scramble as he's done so well and improvise, it might not be as good as the Eagles defense is. There are ways that things get neutralized when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes playing for you. So yeah, I can't wait to watch that matchup in particular. But to the other side of the ball too, I'm sure it's going to be. I'm not. Maybe the Chiefs are getting a little disrespected on defense, given what Spagnuolo. We kind of talked about this briefly at the end of the last episode. Like they've consistently in these big games been able to, maybe they're not like great, they're not like dominant defensive performances, but they find a way to get those stops, force teams into the third and longs, get a couple turnovers here and there, and that's ultimately when you have Patrick Mahomes, that can be the difference.
Well, it's like, I mean, we talked about like the Chris Jones stuff in the game against the Bengals, and like I think they make the big plays at the right time. Like I feel like that's they don't have to be
Yep.
perfect the entire game, but it's like they tend to make the big plays when they need them the most, and that's all you have to do when you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback running the offense and knowing you're going to get some points out of that anyways. But yeah, I mean it's just we know how it works. Like the offense is going to get the attention because this is such a good offense and a team that's going to score a lot of points. But when you
Mm-hmm.
really look at it on the other side, I mean, it's going to be a challenge against this Eagles team because we've talked about it. I mean, you look at Jalen Hurts and what he's done this season. I mean, the addition of AJ Brown has obviously been, we talked about kind of the impact and what the Titans were thinking and all that because it's just such he's such a difference maker in
Oh
terms
yeah.
of what he can do. And I think when you look at it that way, and all the weapons they have too, for Jalen Hurts at his disposal, whether that's doing some different things with Miles Sanders, Devonta Smith, Now they've got Dallas Goedert, who we know, can do a lot of things to kind of alleviate some things as well in their passing game. So, yeah, I mean, the Chiefs defense, that's been their thing is making the right plays at the right time. They're going to be put to the test here because this offense we talked about, I mean, it's one that you really look at what they're capable of and look at what they've done in these first two games in the playoffs, 38 against the Giants, 31 against the Niners. Now, of course, some of that's helped by the defense, but still, I mean, the ability of Jalen Hurts to just do so many different things, yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
It's the biggest challenge they've probably had all season, at least in terms of they've faced some insane quarterbacks, but in terms of this team's ability to be malleable to the situation and have to be so good at so many things. When you're facing, they faced Buffalo and Cincinnati a number of times, and yes, those are probably the toughest quarterbacks outside of playing Mahomes matchups that you could have with Josh Allen and Burrow. But you maybe start to have at least a kind of a plan. You kind of get to know those teams a bit better. They haven't faced this Eagles team. They haven't faced a team that's so physical up front on an offensive line like the Eagles are, but then the ability to, as we talked about with what they did against the Niners, being able to kind of keep those linebackers that love to fly around in San Francisco and even their ends and different guys kind of having to stand around sometimes just waiting to see if Jalen's going to keep the ball. They had kind of counters for in that second half. They started opening up some lanes. A lot of Ted Wynn and other film guys on Twitter talking about all the different ways that they were able to kind of go on the weak side of those plays where the Niners were stacked up to the bunch set of receivers on the right. And eventually the Niners did kind of counter with another DB over there. But then you have Jalen Hurts can just run. So then you have use the running back as a blocker in some of those cases. So, I mean, the Chiefs are going to have to do similar things where they're going to match up with that physicality and just try to make the offensive linemen think about their assignments a bit more, not being able to just stick to the guys they know they want to block before the play starts. They're going to have to probably blitz some guys and just take some chances. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen is the other team scores and you get Mahomes the ball back quicker. It's not a perfect solution, but
Nothing wrong with that.
I think,
Yeah.
they're going to have, and this is what Spagnuolo does, even though this year in particular, maybe he wasn't as aggressive as past years with the way that the Chiefs kind of became, in some ways, a more ball control offense. They still have that explosiveness at times. But I think, they're going to, I'm sure, again, Spagnuolo has a tendency in these big matchups and big games in the playoffs to pull off a game plan that ends up putting the team in at least places it doesn't want to be. We've talked about how Jalen Hurts has improved so much as a passer, and if you look at just his overall passing numbers and efficiency numbers, EPA stuff, it's all really good. But when he's in situations where it's kind of what we're talking about, where this team, if you don't know what they're going to do, if they can run or pass, if they're in third and shorts, they're probably going to sneak it and get the first down. But even if they're just in that like third and medium range, just not knowing exactly what the Eagles are going to do. Obviously, we saw how easy it is to defend a team when you know what they're going to do with the football when the Niners literally couldn't throw. But for Jalen Hurts, another stat that Ted Nguyen, just the GOAT at this stuff, he pulled out is on 3rd and 7 or more this year, Jalen Hurts was 34th among qualified quarterbacks in EPA per dropback. If they know that the Eagles are throwing, they have not in those kind of situations. It hasn't always gone insanely well. So, I mean, that's pivotal for the Eagles from their point of view to stay out of 3rd and long and get to those downs where you only need 3-4 yards. Maybe you do throw, but maybe you run. Maybe you run knowing that if you get a couple of yards, you're probably going to run again and likely get it because no one can stop you when you're to those 4th and shorts. And I think that also just in itself, the Eagles' ability to basically know if they're within like a yard and a half, they're going to get it. That's huge in Super Bowls. It's huge in these kind of games where the margins are so thin to just have such a ability to get a first down anytime you feel like it, essentially. So it's that side of the ball. I mean, yeah, you mentioned A.J. Brown and the matchup, the problems those guys are going to have. I feel like at times the Chiefs linebackers and haven't necessarily been like the best at covering some tight ends too. So Dallas Goedert has a chance to things to open up if they really, what they kind of did against the Bengals with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, doubling both of them often. It opens up opportunities. We talked about how Tyler Boyd getting banged up, how big of an impact that kind of had at certain points for what the Bengals were able to do. And you think about some of the other options that the Eagles have and that have stepped up. So I think Goddard, definitely a guy that on that side of the football, maybe kind of an X factor for Philadelphia in this one, but it's still going to be a big challenge. The Chiefs can do all these things that we're saying to kind of neutralize it, but that is easier said than done to get the Eagles into third and long. It's not. There's a reason that this team has been so dominant, and I know that there's a lot of stuff made about the Eagles' schedule. I think I don't know if we talked about this in the last podcast how they had the easiest schedule in the league, but the Chiefs had the fourth easiest at 29th. So it's like these are just really good teams. And efficiency-wise, those stats like DVOA, they take into account the quality of your opponents. And it's not like they were just barely beating some of these teams. They're dominating their lesser opponents for the most part. That's why these are two of the best teams in the league. And what makes this pick so hard? I'm going to wait till you kind of make your final selection here, but I have a pick, and I think I'm going to stick to it, like I said. But I don't know, man. It's a really tough one.
All right. It is time to make our picks for this matchup. I told you I've said all along this season. I just there's something about the Eagles, and I've talked a lot about that, and just sort of this is just one of those teams, and especially when you look at what they've done in the playoffs to this point, right? Just two dominating performances against the Giants, and then specifically even more impressive against the Niners. I know the situation quarterback and all that, but two pretty dominant performances to say the least. But of course, there's always a but. It's just like, we make our picks because we're like, all right, this is what we have to go on. And I've seen the Chiefs in this spot before. Like, I've seen them here. Now, again, we've seen the Eagles here before, too, not long ago. But this is a completely different sort of setup, right? Because it's a different coaching staff, different quarterback, different nucleus, pretty much, for the most part. Chiefs, we've seen this nucleus here. And we've seen what they've been able to do on the good side. We've seen what they've been able to do on the side of when they played the Bucs. But like I find it hard to pick against that. And it's just knowing that, again, we look at this Chiefs team, and I think the experience in this position, in this spot, again, there's just something about them where I'm like, if I'm making a pick, I don't think I can pick against them. And I don't think I can pick against the league MVP. I don't think I can pick against their creativity offensively and some of the things that they may be able to do here. So there's a lot, again, we just talked about a lot of different sort of angles to this game. But for me, it is just the confidence level. I'm confident in both teams, but I've also feel confident in that Patrick Mahomes is in the biggest spot of the year, in the Super Bowl. And yes, again, I know kind of what happened against the Bucs, but I also know that the Chiefs are one of those teams where, remember the conversations we said a long time ago now, but it's like, what are they going to do without Tyreek Hill? What are they going to do? Like, are they going to be, and they had to win a lot of close games. Let's point that out. They were in some close games this year. They weren't just completely dominating everyone. But the Eagles have been dominant in the playoffs, but I don't know, man. It's just like, I think for me, this is a Mahomes pick more than anything. It's just I trust them to make a play at the end to win the game, and that's what I'll go with.
Yeah, it's a different Chiefs team than 2 years ago, not just because they don't have Tyreek Hill, not just because their offensive line's better. They have an identity running the football that they did not have, that we saw maybe with the Bills in some cases that their fans a lot of times are still asking them to kind of develop this identity, because you have to be able to take advantage of the fact that with these superstar quarterbacks, that teams are going to be sitting back and, maybe it's at certain points giving away matchups in the inside because they just don't want to limit the big play to your star quarterback. The Chiefs are able to exploit that. They have all year run the football well when they get lighter boxes. And the Eagles this year, since week 10 against 12 personnel and 13 personnel, rushing the ball, that defense is 19th. So that's not necessarily great when you're facing a Chiefs team that is probably going to look at what the Cowboys did, like we talked about. The Cowboys used a lot of bigger kind of two tight end sets. They were able to have success with play action or running if the matchups are correct. You kind of put them in a bind a bit. And I think they're going to find that kind of edge there. I just don't think they're going to be able to pin their ears back and try to go after Mahomes the same way that Tampa was able to. If the Eagles get an early lead, I don't think the Chiefs are also going to panic and try to like throw their way back as maybe they kind of did in that Tampa Bay game, because they felt like they had to in that towards the end of the first half, and it led to Tampa scoring again right before the half ended. as much as I love the Eagles and I really like, and I won't be shocked at all if they find a way to win this game. They're just such a, probably the top to bottom, the best roster in the league. I just don't want to. I just don't know if I can pick against Mahomes. If the game's close late, I feel confident that he's going to be able to make a play. It sounds like he's healthy enough against scrambling QBs. Again, the Eagles haven't been exactly perfect when QBs do run out of the pocket. So I just think there's enough there. And again, I think the Chiefs' defense and what they're able to potentially do to cause some problems, at least enough to make this, not the Eagles just completely manhandling them on that side of the ball. I think it's enough for me to pick the Chiefs. I don't know what the exact score would be if I had to say maybe like 34-31. Yeah, I think it's going to be close regardless. I think it'll be pretty high scoring. Maybe that's a little ambitious. Maybe we go 31-28, but I don't know. I'm sticking with the Chiefs. It's the coaching staff, and it's not that this isn't a slight against Sirianni. He should take it for any, not just us, but anyone that says anything against the Eagles. They should use that as fuel. But it's not meant to be disrespect to say that I trust Andy Reid a bit more at this point in his career with the star quarterback, with a roster that I think a lot of guys have stepped up on. So yeah, I'll pick the Chiefs in what should be, I think, a really fun Super Bowl. I really don't think we're going to have a game like the Super Bowl 55 blowout with Tampa Bay over the Chiefs. I think maybe it's going to be more of the vibes of that Eagles the Patriots Super Bowl a few years back. A little better defense than that one, I'd hope. There wasn't much defense at times in that game, but I think it'll still be a really close affair that might come down right to a last-minute field goal, last-second Hail Mary heave, something like that.
I'll go 27-24. I think that may be low, but I'm gonna stick with that as my score. There on this one. I'm curious from that standpoint of what this game looks like from the scoring standpoint in this one. I'm kind of fascinated to see.
I think you're right at the over-under, aren't you? I think it was 50.5. You nailed that.
Well, there you go. I will take the over by half a point. So yeah, well, I'm not confident either way on this one. I think both of us are kind of in that same range where it's just this is a hard one to call. But yep. Yeah, I think and that makes it fun because I have no idea how this game's going to play out. So there have been some in the past, maybe been a little more predictable than others. I don't think this one's very predictable at all. So, all right, we'll quickly wrap up with some of our prop bets as we go through these. And again, we have our big three we always go to, and two of these are just absolutely ridiculous, but one is not. Super Bowl MVP. If I'm picking the Chiefs to win, I'm going to pick Patrick Mahomes. I know you're going to go the Travis Kelce direction, Dylan, but I think Isaiah Pacheco is an interesting one too because of what you just talked about. What happens if he breaks off a couple touchdowns? I think he's an interesting one to think about here. Is sort of what are the odds for him right now?
Oh boy, they're really good if you want to go that route.
Let's see what they are. They're plus 5,000. I think there's some value there. But again, that's also like McKinnon has the same, and so you're like, oh boy, you're having to risk what you actually think they could do here. If McKinnon catches a couple passes for touchdowns, I get it. It's tough, but it's possible, right? It's possible. So.
It's possible. I don't think, I was trying to think out, looking down the list further. Chris Jones was initially interesting, but I just don't see the setup that we had with Von Miller in Super Bowl 50, being able to get those strip sacks. I don't know if they're going to be in situations just coming right for Jalen. From the Eagles' point of view, if they are to win this game, obviously Hurts is the easy one, but if you want to be more fun with it, maybe you do go with one of the receivers, Devontae Smith at plus 3,100. Maybe that's an interesting one. Maybe he gets a couple touchdowns, kind of pulls the Cooper Kupp award the way that he did last year. But yeah, I went with Kelce. Just because if it's not going to be Pat, it's probably going to be Pat. But if it's not going to be Pat, I could see, Kelce by the end of it stacking up a ridiculous number of receptions. Maybe he gets a couple touchdowns. Maybe if Mahomes has a couple turnovers or different things that take away from his MVP candidacy, that would help Kelce's in terms of the votes that might come his way. But it's always interesting. I mean, last year, I think you may have predicted, or at least we definitely mentioned Kupp as a possibility. I know Stafford was the favorite. Yeah. But it doesn't always go the way you think it might. You look at the history of Super Bowl MVPs, and yeah, it's littered with tons of quarterbacks, it's star quarterbacks, but there are also plenty of guys that you're like, wait, who's Malcolm Smith for the that's all I
Yeah.
think off the top of my head for the Seahawks. Some of the when the Bucks won, I was a defender, but then another guy had two pick sixes on the last play of the game, and then it was like, should he have won it instead? So it's
No.
going back to Super Bowl 37. So yeah, it's all over the place. Who knows? Maybe we will get one of these. Maybe some defender will have like two interceptions and one pick six, and the stats will kind of be muddied between everyone else, and he'll get the win. Who knows?
What about Jason Kelsey? Can we get him some odds? Can we get
There you go.
can we get him some odds in this thing? Come on. We're just talking about Travis. What about Jason? Can he get some odds? No. I think again this one seems pretty clear cut depending on who wins, but that's always the case when it comes to this award for the most part. So, all right, quickly, Gatorade color, Dylan, our favorite. So I did some research on this one because we really like to have informed opinions here. And what did I do? I went to Google and typed in Chiefs Super Bowl championship Andy Reid celebration. That was my Google phrase that I typed in. And what did it send me to? It directly sent me to the Gatorade being poured on Andy Reid when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl several years ago. And the Gatorade color was orange. And so I'm going back to orange for this one. If I'm picking the Chiefs to win, Gatorade color is orange. And I think there's some superstition in play there. They're going to go with what works. So give me orange for this one.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I had to go a different direction, not just to double up there. I know I picked the Chiefs, but part of their color scheme is yellow. Yellow is
It
still
is.
pretty one of the popular ones here, and it was the color when the Eagles won the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 52.
Oh,
So
so
maybe I'm
you've got
kind
a
of
better, yeah,
doubling
you're
up. That way,
doubling
if
up.
I lose my pick for the
Yeah,
game, maybe I'll win the Gatorade. So I'm kind of playing
that's
both
smart.
sides here, and but then also still holding out hope that if the Chiefs do, they could just by chance on accident, maybe they have the lucky orange, but then some guy grabs the yellow instead. So we'll see.
A big choice there for both of
Yes.
us. A lot at stake. The odds. So yeah, you're getting plus odds no matter what on these. So keep that in mind. There. All right, the coin toss. Always a lot of research needs to be done on this one too, Dylan. I think we always pick differently, no matter what, just for so one of us will get it right. But I told you I'm just feeling the tails. Like something about tails this season. I think minus 104 the odds for both of these. Give me tails on the coin toss.
Yeah, it has a good chance there. I think you got
A
about
lot of
50%
analysis on this one.
chance. I'm gonna
Yes.
go heads, I guess, just the
Wow.
to switch it
Wow.
up. I'm
Can't
usually
believe
a
you.
tails guy too, so I don't.
Man.
Not that there really should be. You should be a guy of any either one. I think switching up's probably maybe
Yeah.
increases your chances slightly. Probably decreases them at the same time. But hey, you want to win more often than not. So I'll go heads and switch it up.
I thought you'd be out measuring the wins and all that, but apparently not to kind of get an idea of where the coin could fall. But all right, so those are the main ones. And again, there's so many ridiculous ones outside of this. We could probably spend all day looking at some of these other kind of ridiculous odds. They're just there's so many kind of fascinating ones when you look at like the over under for the passing yards. Jalen Hurts is set at like 238.5. Mahomes is set at 292.5. I may actually go under on Mahomes in the 292.5, maybe slightly. But again, getting to 300 yards for Mahomes is not probably the hardest thing to do. Anything else, Dylan, that catches your eye here before we wrap it? There's so many, like I said, there's
There's
so
so
many
many.
prop bets where it's
I
like
like.
you
Yeah.
could get lost in these.
I like the one you just said a lot. If this game script goes the way I think the Chiefs would maybe want it to, they're going to have some balance on their offense. I think that still Mahomes is going to be a major weapon and a big part of it, but it's not going to always be the 40-yard plays. It might be the 15-yard, 20-yard kind of range, and I like the odds there for that under. I don't feel I'm not. It's not going to be a fun experience if you bet that watching Mahomes and rooting against him getting passing yards because usually that doesn't work out too well. Looking through these, I mean, I like the one. There was one on what's going to happen the first time the Chiefs have the ball. And if the underdog was actually them scoring points, I would take that. They seem to have, especially you looked at the Jaguars game, they seem to have good opening scripts even against the Bengals. I forget if they scored in the first possession. I think they did get a field goal at least. So you don't need a touchdown, you just need points. So that was like plus
Yeah.
120 or 130 or something to take them scoring points in the first one. Maybe that's my kind of one. But yeah, like you said, there's just you get lost and all these things. I always like looking at the defensive touchdown, special teams touchdown ones. I'm gonna say in this game, I don't think it's gonna happen, but it's again not always fun to root for something when you're at minus 400 odds. So you could bet that, but that's at least my recommendation. I don't think we're gonna see a defensive special teams touchdown. Watch it just happen now. With
Yeah.
the way that the Chiefs return game is pretty dangerous, but yeah, it's I'm trying to look through these. There's just so many, like you said, net yards.
There's
I
just
mean,
so many
I would
ridiculous ones. Yeah.
Maybe I would maybe go with the Eagles are at 366.5, the Chiefs at 359.5 total yards over under. I could see a scenario where the team gets the over on one of these, especially maybe the Eagles, I'll say, but then still doesn't, if they're having to settle for field goals in some cases or going for it in fourth downs when they don't, or a little bit longer, they don't get it. Maybe they still trying to formulate it into my plan of the Chiefs winning this game, but I like the over on maybe both of those. Actually, I think the Chiefs could definitely throw for like in that range right under the over under you mentioned. Maybe they get like 265 passing yards and 100 rushing yards. That takes them over their over under. So maybe I'm just going yards here. Forget points. I'm on the all yards team. And then the last play of the game is a QB kneel. As I know you mentioned that before. Always a fun
Oh
one.
yeah.
I would maybe I'll go with yes there. I know it's the favorite, but I'm taking my chances on a team getting the ball back. Maybe they get a stop late, or the other team does an onside kick and it's not enough time, and we'll go with that kneel with the yes at minus 123 or 230.
Here's my favorite one of the bunch. Largest lead of the game. Over 14.5 is plus 106. Under 14.5 is still minus 132. So, like, it's not the worst odds, but, like, I don't think this is going to be a 2-touchdown type game.
If it is,
So,
it's not going to be for
now look,
long, but that's all you need.
no, I think I'm going to take that. Even at minus 132, I just cannot see. And even if you take the over 14.5, like, you're not getting a ton of value there. So,
No.
yeah, I would even at minus 132, I feel very confident this is not going to be a 2-touchdown game in this one. And look, even though both offenses are capable of putting up big points, but I just don't think it's going to happen. So
Yeah, I'm
there's
with you.
one that I would circle there on that. But there you go. As we said, this could be a 8-hour podcast if we went into looking at all of these possible prop bets that are out there. But for now, Dylan, those are our picks. And of course, you've got it all covered over Clutch Points. Everything everyone needs for Super Bowl 57. So let everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, you can follow the game in the ClutchPoints app, the big game, as we're maybe I'll just, now that we have a promotional kind of part, I'll say the big game instead of Super Bowl. No, you can follow Chiefs, Eagles in the ClutchPoints app. You can, we have tons of preview content. We've been going through X factors for both teams, explanations of how each team could win with kind of longer form pieces on those things. Obviously, tons of news coverage on injuries. We got Ladarius Sneed, sounds like he's going to be the full go. Kadarius Toney sounds like he's going to be active. So McCole Hardman, maybe not so much. But yeah, all that stuff's covered on Clutch Points. Tons of fallout. We'll have the NFL awards or NFL honors ceremony covered live with on our site and the app, content on any big moments that happen, but also just running through the awards as they go by. We had some predictions for that out as well. And then it'll be full go time for the off season. Right now we have, as I mentioned on the last podcast, if you're a fan of the other 30 teams and you're looking at your free agents and possible cap casualties, we've got looking at all the players that teams need to re-sign, the players they might need to cut, surprise roster cut situations, and then next week we'll get to just kind of overall off-season predictions. But lots of good stuff in the NFL at Clutch Points.
Yep, check it all out there. Lots of stuff to get you ready for the game, and obviously the reaction to it as well. So do that at Clutch Points, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast, any podcast app you use. Search for Establish the Pass. And thanks as always for listening to the podcast, and we'll talk to you next time here on the Establish the Pass podcast.